Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's SecurityBoulevard.com panel, brought to you by TechStrong. My name is Cody J. Brown. I'm the host of TechStrong Learning. We have an invigorating panel ahead, but first, I have a few housekeeping notes to cover. First, today's session is being recorded, so if you miss any of our discussion or you'd like to rewatch, the on-demand will be made available shortly after we conclude today's panel. If you have any questions, we want you to go ahead and submit those to the Q&A tab, which can be found on the right side of your screen. And for any additional comments, or you just want to let us know from where you're tuning in, we want you to use the chat tab. We plan to keep an eye on that and be active in that chat tab today, so we hope to see you there. And finally, at the conclusion of our webinar, we will have a drawing for 4 $25 Amazon gift cards, so stick around. So our topic today is a CISO Talk Master Class about catching lightning in a bottle. And at this point in time, it's my pleasure to turn the floor over to Mitch to introduce the rest of our expert panel. Thank you all for being here with me today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Cody. Appreciate having this great panel with us today, and along with my co-host, Matt Newfield. Matt, good to see you again, as always.
Always a pleasure, Mitch.
So we'll do some introductions here, and then we're going to jump into our topic. So I'd like to start out with JJ Manella. Would you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. Hi, guys. Jennifer Manella, JJ. I am founder and principal advisor with Vision Security. So most of my role involves enterprise security architecture, which is working with CISOs and working with the technology operations teams to help kind of bridge the gap between security and operations.
Excellent. Julie, how about you?
Hi, Julie Cullivan, former CIO with responsibility for security, also Chief People Officer, Chief Technology Officer, and have worked for several security technology providers. So this is a topic that's near and dear. And thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining. Chuck.
Hey everybody, I'm Chuck Kessler. I'm the CISO at Pindo.io. Pindo makes software that helps our customers make better software. Digital adoption and product experience solutions. So very happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation today.
Excellent. And our originator, creator of the series has joined us today, Alan Schimmel, my co-founder partner for many years, 20 plus years. Good to be on a panel with you, Alan. Thanks for joining. Say a little bit about yourself too.
Thanks, Mitch. Well, I think you said enough. It is interesting, different to be on the other side here. I'm usually asking people to introduce themselves. So, but yes, I'm CEO TechStrong, people behind DevOps.com, Security Boulevard, Container Journal, TechStrong TV, CISO Talk, TechStrong Research, which Mitchell's principal. And I've been in the security space for a long time, 20 plus years. 25 years maybe, and happy to be here today.
Very good. And I'm Mitch Ashley, CTO of TechStrong, as well as principal of TechStrong Research. This is a special series. I'm going to have Matt have you introduce yourself in just a moment. This is a special thing we're doing here. CISO Talk's been going on for quite a while. I mean, over a year. Matt has a talk as a topic of, he's really passionate about helping other CISOs. Whether you're entering into the field, you're in the midst of it, how do we share and learn and help each other succeed, bring up kind of the next generation, all those things. And Matt had this idea for a masterclass series. And so we have actually 6 episodes. This is the first one we're kicking off via this webinar format, live format. And we also have some recorded versions that will come out on TechStrong TV. By the way, Alan is star of TechStrong TV. So check that out too. And then we'll conclude with another webinar live format in a few months down the road, probably in our June-ish timeframe. So I'd love for Matt, for you to, of course, introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about what the purpose of the series is, and then we can kick off the conversation.
So thank you so much, Mitch. And hello, everybody. Again, my name is Matt Newfield. I am the CSIO for Unisys Corporation. And the title is really a combination. I'm both the CIO and the CISO. And the joke we always say is because neither's a full-time job, right? So we tried to combine them here. And what we're really talking about, I've spent a lot of time out on the road working with CISOs, working with CIOs, And I got to see a lot of the issues that I used to deal with, I still deal with, and all of the issues that, you know, my peers in industry were dealing with. And as I was looking through all of my notes quite a while ago, because I'm weird and don't sleep that much, started to pull things together to see if I could find similarities. And it was very interesting how similar everybody's problems were, because we're all trying to boil this massive ocean of cybersecurity. We're all trying to do these massive things, and we were forgetting about some basics. So as Mitch said, we have a 6-part series, and we are opening it up today, and I'll talk a little about how we're going to handle today. But the other parts of the series, we're going to focus on security frameworks and some of the importance of those frameworks, as well as dispelling some of the, you know, misnomers and some of the issues that people may have around frameworks. We're going to talk about implementing active response strategies. How do you do that? How do you practice? What does good look like if you're practicing an active response strategy? We're going to talk about the evolution of security incidents. And one of the things you'll notice throughout this series, and most of CISO talks, we will talk about incidents and not breaches. Incidents happen all the time. Breaches are the thing that happen after an incident and hopefully don't ever happen to you, but we're going to talk about incidents. And we're going to talk about crisis avoidance and the importance of proper communication. You know, we have a tendency in our field, and I used to be awful about this, of speaking in the world of FUD, fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and how we have to stop doing that. Julie, remember this from a conversation we had a while ago, and how to actually speak to the business so that you are looked at as an advisor and a partner, instead of what a lot of us are looked at is the no person, or the scary person, or the person who asks for a lot of money and has a hard time proving why that money was well spent. So what are we doing today? Well, we have a panel of just massive experts here. And we had some conversations prior to this, and I'm really excited about their viewpoints. And what we wanted to do today was really focus our discussion around the evolving threat landscape, things that we are seeing in the world, things that we saw coming out of 2021 into 2022. We want to talk about the role the CISO, or head of security, plays in risk management, because that's a big one that a lot of people never thought of CISOs playing a role in. We're not in risk management, we're in security prevention or security implementation. So we want to talk about that. And we're going to get some advice from Julie and JJ, Alan and Chuck on strategies they believe in, on how to effectively detect, how to effectively contain cyber incidents within their infrastructure. So with that said, I think we should jump in. And the way we always do this is I pose a big question to start, and we're just going to start having a conversation. As you heard before, if anybody that's joined this webinar has questions, there's a chat feature. Ask questions. We'll be keeping an eye on that. Most likely, we will not do a ton of typing because it takes the focus off, but we'll bring those questions into the conversation. So I'm really excited about that. So first question. Most of us speak to an executive team or to a board. I do 5 times a year for a board, and I speak to the executive team on average every single day. And we talk about those big things that we need to keep our eyes on, and it can't be everything. So every year we focus on a couple of big things that I want our executive team and our board to really pay attention to when they're reading the news, when they're reading whatever blogs, to really hone in on. So my question to our panel today is, what's your big thing or big things for 2022? And I want to open it up to general. Who would like to go first?
No one? I'll go first if no one wants to go.
Love it.
So here's the big thing for 2022. The big thing is that it's a big thing. And quite frankly, it's too big a thing for one person. I think it's successful. When I look at CISOs today versus CISOs 10 years ago, who were glorified security architects brought in to set up a security program, And then either they were demoted to like being a security admin with a CISO title or shown the door. Versus today's CISOs that are really integrated into the executive team and then, you know, board level type of access, is that this is such a big domain. Whether we're talking about application security, which is a world unto itself, encompassing DevSecOps and Dev and all of these cool technologies and SRE and all of that stuff, or we're talking about cloud security, or, you know, it's kind of block and tackle endpoints and policies, response. This domain has outgrown one person being able to truly have his or her fingers just in every pie. A good CISO today, their big thing is to have a staff that's going to allow them to really manage the domain, to really accomplish the mission. It's more than a one-person job. It's almost like you have to have an office of the CISO, where you have one guy or one gal who is the one person who is the CISO perhaps, but they need trusted lieutenants who can help them at the various places, the various domains, the various, you know, different I don't want to use the word silos, it's a bad word, but the various different, you know, let's call them battlefronts, or you know, where it's
I want to expand on that, Alan, real quick. I'm sorry you froze for me for just a sec. It's not only internal, but we'll throw it out there, and as part of some of the series we'll talk about later. You know, a lot of people that are in these roles focus on just the staff they have in their employ and forget about the partnerships. The partnerships to me are absolutely 100% key. We can only do so much because you get caught up in the day-to-day. What we spend a lot of time talking about is building up trusted partners. And I think a lot of people mistake the fact that trusted partners don't have to just be intelligence companies. A trusted partner, for example, for me could be Julie. Spending time getting to know Julie so that we have a way to share information across organizations. Because one of the things we talk about on CISO Talks all the time is we're all on the same side of this. We're all friends, right? I'm not in competition with anybody here. We all have the same goals, the same mission. We're all together. So that to me is really important.
So,
and I agree, there's a ton here, but there's got to be a couple things. Chuck, what do you got?
Oh, JJ was going to, I think, jump into.
Yeah, Jennifer was next.
Jennifer, sorry.
I was actually trying to jump in.
Sorry.
No, I think, Matt, I think you kind of want to get back to the original question, but there's definitely some threads in what Alan's brought up. So it's partnership outside your organization, right? And I will say that my experience is the CISO community in particular is one of the most giving communities that you have out there. And to your point, right, there is no, I'm not going to tell you what we're doing for this. It is amazing how helpful and supportive. And you just look at Log4j and all these things, how people come together to help each other. And that doesn't always happen across other functions. I think that's important. But I also think the partnership internally is so critical because the world has changed in terms of product is now the company. Like the CISO doesn't have anything carved out. They literally touch everything, and making sure that those partnerships are solid and strong and strategic, but also more and more, like Matt, you've picked up some of those where it used to be about partnership. And now it's like, hey, why don't we actually have these organizationally aligned, right? So that we can really drive change. So I know that's not what your question was, but I wanted to pull those threads.
Yeah, I wanted to pull those threads a little bit as well. 100% agree in terms of external partnerships. I know, we've had ISACs and things like that for years, but in the last few years, I've really gotten a tremendous amount of value out of, I think I've got 3 different Slack networks of CISOs now that I interact with. Some of them are local, some of them are national, international, but those communities are tremendous. Just sharing the things that we're dealing with on a daily basis. sometimes some inside information of things that we need to be able to keep an eye out for, but just the camaraderie, if nothing else, is very helpful. Even in some cases, relationships with CISOs that are, our companies are competitors, but, we still work together, we still collaborate. So that's wonderful. It's very empowering, and I think it keeps me going some days. The other side of it that I wanted to mention in terms of internal partnerships, the concept of security champions, I think, is really key here as well. Yeah, we have a team, we want to have more security headcount. We're never going to have enough security headcount to sit in every single conversation that we need to be a part of. So it's trying to build those partnerships internally with, whether it be in engineering, our people team, our sales team, those folks that are advocates for security that want to learn more about security. I want to give them information, let them become our eyes and ears in some of those conversations that we can't be part of. Let them understand what the guardrails are. If you're operating inside of these guardrails, this is fine. If you see something that appears to be maybe not quite in there, let's talk about it. So, we're trying to do that as well, trying to extend our team through the security champions concept.
So if we do go back to your original question, I'm kind of with Alan that it's really hard to ever say there's one thing. There's certainly some priorities, right? And you brought this up earlier. Like, look, it depends on where you are from a maturity perspective. Small company, big company, who do you sell to, right? Like, there's all these other things that play into where folks are going to try to prioritize. I would say I see a lot of prioritization around the continued compliance, challenges that even the smallest of companies are now being held responsible to, be compliant around. And that's just going to continue to get tougher, I think, because, of what's going on in the world today. There's always something new that the federal government's going to come in and say, or financial services, look, we need to amp these things up. So I think that's one thing that ends up taking a lot of capacity. And then I think the other is still around visibility, right? Because the amount of new services, new devices, every day there's something new happening. And how do you make sure that you really have visibility to all those things? So I'll just throw those out, but I know that there's many more.
So, and I think I want to clarify the statement, and I agree with you. There's never only a thing. If I only had to focus on one thing in the year, man, that would just be, I wouldn't know what to do with myself. Most likely, I'd be like, I think I'm out of a job, because I don't need teams and partners to focus on a thing. But, generally, there's a top priority that we're all focused on. And you gave two big ones. Visibility, that's been something we've been talking about for years. It's hard to protect that thing that you can't see, right? And, I think it's important to note out there, I have yet to see in my career someone that can sit in a meeting with me or anybody else, go, no. I have 100% real-time visibility of every asset across my network, unless that company is 6 people in the same building, generally sharing the same space with the server room right there, right? I mean, it's not possible. And if anybody invents a way to do that, I want to buy in really, really early. So let me know. JJ, we haven't heard from you. Oh.
Sorry, I was just going to add really quickly on the visibility front, and the one thing, actually, we just recently went through our strategic planning process. We arrived at 3 strategic anchors for our year. So everything's going to tie back to these 3 concepts. So the first one, visibility. Second one is automation, trying to take the drudgery out of things, automate what we can. The third one is assurance, and that kind of gets into the compliance side of things. We have a FedRAMP program ongoing right now. That is, getting through that first audit is, probably my number one priority. I hate that compliance is the driver there, because I like security to drive compliance, not the other way around. But yeah, those are my strategic anchors. Seems to align exactly with this conversation. Sorry, JJ.
No, we're good. I was laughing because Matt, I'm, having helped and coming out of a relatively small environment. It's I think even with a handful of people, there's this small space. It's still not possible. One of them, the latest phone system, has a USB port on it that you can't. It's impossible. But no, I was trying to think of some clever way to disagree with Alan. But the problem is that his statement is the entire basis of what I do and what my company offers, and that's that. Somewhere along the way. So obviously, several of you guys have known me for a very long time. I came out of the network architecture and network, like sysadmin kind of side forever ago, 30 something, 20 something, 30 years ago. And then started doing more security and then, consulting and working with organizations. And what I realized through all of that, when we were doing these complex projects that were crossing between networking and security functions and compliance, was that most of the problems we had weren't technology problems. They were kind of people problems, or more importantly, relationship and trust problems.
Mhm.
And so, shifting and taking the technical knowledge and then sitting between these teams, now watching, all of the trends, I'm going to just call them trends, like zero trust. To me, zero trust is a very real, tangible thing. It's, coming out of network access control solutions. I know, Julie is really familiar with that. This is just kind of the next iteration of an advanced access control solution that's a little bit more complex and granular. But all of this, you said you can't have one person doing it yourself. And in fact, I just wrote a book with Wiley, and although it's a wireless security architecture book, it goes through an enterprise security architect standpoint of network security, risk and compliance, the role of what we do with the CISO and with analysts, mapping controls over and make it, how to teach a technologist to make some of these decisions. Because what I realize is that a lot of organizations, there's, I don't want to use the word silo either, Alan, but there's a knowledge silo, if nothing else, where, they're nose down with the blinky lights. And the challenge is that we have a suite of products that are unbelievably complex, just writing the wireless book. So this is one piece of one network component out of the broad, rainbow spectrum of technology. The manufacturer's books for one piece of their solution set is 2,000-3,000 pages, and any enterprise system, a network system, is going to have dozens of these. And so you start to, you have these people that are just spending so much time and effort figuring out where the knobs are in these products, they can't possibly do everything else, and vice versa. And so this kind of idea of, building cross-functional teams in a meaningful way, getting these people that have the hands-on knowledge, because there's really nobody better to defend the systems than your senior sysadmins and network architects for those type of systems. Same thing with application security, right? The people that understand the nuts and bolts know how to lock it down. So I think, kind of kicking down these doors and saying, you've got to stop having these separate functions and build trust between these groups and people so that we can come up with solutions ourselves as a group and move forward.
So I'd love to tag on this a little bit, because what you just said, JJ, and something Chuck said earlier, I think is really important. We have a concept that a lot of us talk about, and Chuck, you said champions. You're talking about building relationships, JJ. Julie has had this conversation. Mitch and I talk about it all the time. This, for us, in the size company I work for, it's a BISO. How do I build out these relationships? It's a business information security officer that we can start building out, generally are looking to become CISOs, be part of that C-suite one day, and that's how they're working their way up. But those relationships are key. And, when I first got here, one of my big things, and, I loved the power of three, I'm weird like that as well, but was building the relationships. I could not be successful in my job if I didn't build the relationships. And that was one of my key things I talked to our board about, because in my opinion, and we can discuss this, the number one reason for shadow IT inside of organizations is lack of trust and lack of relationships. If Chuck, you're viewed inside of your company as the person of no and hard to work with, why would I go through you? If I need something, I'll build it myself. And I've made it even harder for myself, because I'm not only the security guy to say no, I'm the IT guy that needs to do what you need securely. And if we don't have relationships, that will really destroy a company. And, for those that are joining, you feel free to put something in the comment if you've got questions or you have a big thing. The big point here is it's not a one size fits all. You see some commonality in what we're talking about. Compliance will always be a big thing for us. We go through more audits than I care to talk about. And Chuck, if I can ever help you with FedRAMP, just let me know. We deal with NIST all the time, and now we have CMMC coming out where you're not able to do self audits anymore. You have the CMMC accreditation board that is working through that with the different variants there. Automated discovery and response, it's a huge thing. Zero trust, JJ, we've been talking about for a long time, and it's wrapping people's heads around it is a big thing that they have to do. And for me, one of our big things is third-party risk. We all talk about stuff, but something that happened really recently is that Log4j situation. And I have to throw it out there, even for us. I also have channels like you do, Chuck, where I talk to a lot of people. We were able to do such a rapid response to that threat because of my relationships. We would find Log4j sitting in someone's appliance, and I didn't hold that to ourselves. I let everybody know, in case you have this appliance, they have no documentation on it, they're using this is what you need to do as a workaround. Already notified, here's my ticket number, right? And being able to have those kinds of conversations, they were flooding back into us, really sped up our response. And we see that all the time with things like TTPs and IOCs.
Helen, I think you were trying to jump in earlier. I'd love to hear.
I had several points I was going to jump in, and I forget them. But what I do want to talk about, the C word. To me, compliance, that's the C word, is the ultimate tail wagging the dog issue in our industry.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought we were behind this. We put this behind us. There was a time, maybe 7 to 10 years ago, where I felt compliance overtook security in terms of what was CISO and security team's major focus. And what a setback that was for the security industry, because we adopted a least common denominator. Because let's face it, most compliance regs, they are least common denominator security. They're what we say in Vegas, a fine beginning, but it's not the end. It's not the big payoff. It's not the win. They're the minimum we should be doing. And when we focus too much on compliance, the tail wags the dog. We focus on what is the minimum we should do. And then when crap hits the fan, we say, oh, but we were PCI, HIPAA compliant, we were this, we were, yeah. Bullshit. Go do zero trust. Go do real security that makes us secure. I was always taught that compliance is a byproduct of security. If you do your security right, your compliance will follow. Right? For the most part, there's a lot of compliance that gets dredged up today to our compliance regs that, quite frankly, have nothing to do with technology and very little to do with security. Right? But they're in there because some politician, or not even some bureaucrat, some administrator somewhere, some dude on a board decided, oh, we should throw that, onto the pile.
Look, they're table stakes. You're 100% right. And if you're doing things correctly in your organization, you have a good security program. And we'll talk about frameworks in an upcoming episode, and how doing good security tied to a good framework will help in the compliance world. That way you're not all over the place. It is the right thing to do, instead of saying, to your point, there's nothing worse than speaking to executives at a company going, we don't need more security because, to your point, I'm ISO certified, or I've got PCI, or we have a third-party security. They pen test us once a year. We're good to go. I'm like, wow, you were as good as the second they pen tested you, and not a second after, right? And go ahead.
I think the counterpoint of that, though, is, and so one of the challenges I see across, dealing with, I'm not even going to call them CISOs, people that are tasked with security in different organizations, is that a lot of these panels, everybody came from a large organization that was very mature. The other 92% of organizations and businesses don't have that maturity. They don't have the people resources. They don't have the tools resources. You've got people responsible for security, whether they're called a CISO or something else, that were a webmaster 2 years before, or a Linux system admin or a network admin, that understand pieces of what it is to be a CISO, but don't really understand and don't have any experience in building a risk management program and understanding what that baseline security should be. So from that perspective, I do believe there's some value in some of the compliance requirements. And I think CMMC shines a huge light on this. So moving from, DFARS to CMMC is you have all of these small businesses and manufacturers that have to meet these requirements that, when we look at it, they're bottom, right? They're the minimum baseline requirements, but a lot of small businesses and other smaller public sector, like schools that are meeting these requirements, are struggling with it. So I think there can be value, but I do agree that, security does not equal compliance, or compliance does not equal security.
I agree with both points, right? The reality is nobody thinks this is the way it should be, but for some CISOs in security programs, compliance is a way for them to gain traction, right? Because people understand that this now impacts our ability to do business with a large market that's out there. So I don't think any of us want it to be this way, but because of CMMC, this is now, people are now like talking about the business impact of this, as opposed to, oh, you're asking me to do. And again, these programs, like, look, they need to be driven by your sales organization and your other teams, right? Not just the security team trying to make this happen. So I think it's unfortunate, but there are plenty of companies out there that still have not really prioritized security and compliance the way it needs to be prioritized.
Yeah. It's a changing landscape, but I consider compliance a reporting problem. Most of the time you're doing most of the things the regs require. It's just how do you document, how you get into this whole morass of that. One of the things I think also, we talked about building relationships and trust. We have to take an external to security view of that. It's getting ourselves aligned with the business, right? The dev organizations are pushing to move faster and faster and get software out the door more quickly, because that enables what the business wants to accomplish. And we have to get out of the sort of tail end of the dog all of the time, where we're forced to be the people that say no, and getting with software teams, worrying about app security, getting with other parts of the organization to design security into products as much as possible. But I think that takes alignment. Chuck, you mentioned your 3 strategies. That's got to align with what's important to the business this year, because that's what they're going to drive to. And if we're over here with our own parallel, stovepipe set of issues, siloed issues or strategies, we're going to be, looking for the next job in 6 to 9 months, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And ultimately, you've got to tie it all back to the business. I would just pick on the compliance thing for a second. Yes, if, it's SOC 2 compliance, PCI compliance, or whatever, putting that in the context of, look, if we do this work, it opens up markets for us. Actually, in some cases, if your competitors aren't doing it, it might create a competitive advantage for you. So that's how I try to talk about those things. As AJ said, most companies aren't even, at that level. So, Pendo is a very fast growing company. When I joined a few years back, 250 people, close to 1,000 people, one of those tech unicorn types of companies. So we very much look at security as a strategic advantage. It's empowered that growth. I don't think we would have had that kind of growth, and particularly being able to get a lot of enterprise customers if we weren't investing in security. And compliance is part of how we demonstrate that we're investing in security. I try to make sure it's not the only thing that we're doing, that we're not just trying to check the boxes, that we're trying to do the right things that essentially have security drive compliance and not the other way around. But at the end of the day, being able to have a third party come in and actually audit us and say, look, these were all the controls. We looked at them. They were operating effectively. Preferably not just a point in time, but over a course of a long period of time, like our SOC 2 Type 2 audit, which covers 12 months, where they go back and look at evidence across that entire period. I think that's helpful. And back to the earlier conversations around third-party risk management, I'm not going to say that every single customer or vendor of mine, just because they have a SOC 2, is going to be secure, but it's a signal, right? It's a signal that shows me, okay, they're investing I still want to dig around and understand a little bit what they're actually doing and how we're actually going to use that service. I have a lot of questions, as many questions internally as I do for the vendor in that regard, because I want to understand what my internal users are going to send to that third party, how they're going to send it to them and all that. But, at least I have some signal if there's an audit or some sort of compliance I can look at and say, okay, they're doing some work. That's a starting point.
So I'm such a big fan. I don't think any of us are saying compliance is bad. I mean, I love CMMC so much that I recently joined the board of the CMMC accreditation body. I'm a big fan, right? I want to drive the ability to comply with those minimum baselines, but I think that's the point. It's a lot of times it's a minimum baseline. It's a framework. And again, we're going to talk about frameworks in an upcoming episode and hopefully everybody will join us, and the importance of framework and being compliant with those frameworks. But that doesn't mean it doesn't equate to you're perfectly secure, I think is the big point for everybody. There was an interesting question posed in the chat that JJ's been answering in chat, but I thought we could just throw into the conversation, do a little bit of a right shift, because I like the question, which is, what is the role of the CISO in the zero trust security process, and how will it be effective in organizations? And I find that interesting because for me, zero trust, and we had another episode about this, actually starts in non-technology. It's funny, when that first started coming out, even in our own organization, people were really offended, especially my colleagues that were dealing in the federal space, because they're like, how do you have zero trust methodologies on a trusted network? This isn't a right way to go. And it was psychology that we started with before we got into technology. So I'd love, and JJ's put some really good comments in the chat, but to get the rest of the team here to discuss this, because I thought it was a really good question.
I think it's in part, Matt, it's a transition from, we all kind of have some of our DNA still tied into the bastion host, if you go far enough back, right? Building a firewall, building the moats. And we live in a world where everything is changing all the time. And you don't know what state it's going to be in. It's impossible for us to know what we're dealing with at all times. So you have to have strategies or an approach that can adapt with what's happening, not what is. And I think that's part of why zero trust has gained some acceptance, because the old way doesn't work. We have to have a better way of thinking about building trust, but not having trust on where we can't be susceptible to something.
Well, I mean, the foundation of the conversation we had a while ago is, in the old days, if the traffic originated from inside an office, like the office I'm sitting in my company, therefore it must be good traffic. And nowadays you sort of scratch your head and go, what? You get these third parties that would come in and go, I baselined, we came in and scanned your environment and we baselined it, and anything that deviates from this baseline is going to be considered bad. And you're like, so everything happening today is good? And everybody's smiling because that's a bad assumption.
Gotta have a good baseline. Yeah.
That's right. So Chuck, Julie, any other comments on zero trust methodologies for you?
I think Jennifer and Chuck probably can speak more. I guess my thought, this goes back to what Jennifer was saying earlier about, look, it all starts with an open dialogue right across the organization, right? Because these are things that have to be, planned for and understood, right? And really thought through before implementation, right? Because of the risk of business disruption, to the point you're making, right? So again, this trust word keeps coming up, but I also think this is where the risk conversation comes in as well, because, right, it's one thing to have a trusting relationship with other parts of the organization, but it's something else for the CISO to be able to have those conversations in the context of, look, you feel strongly about this. We as a security organization feel strongly about this. How do we turn this into a discussion about likelihood, risk? What would the impact to the business be? What's at stake? That's where I think it changes the conversation quite a bit.
Yeah, and the thing I would add is that zero trust, it's a powerful concept. It applies differently in different organizations. Pendo is it's a cloud native company. We're an 8-year-old company. Just moved into a brand new office, wonderful location. There's not, and never in any of our offices have there been a rack of servers or anything resembling kind of corporate IT. We are fully, everything that we do is in the cloud. Our product is in the cloud. All of our corporate services are cloud-based. So for us, Zero Trust is really more based around a little bit of control on the device and some identity management in the cloud, a little bit of device trust around that. But I don't worry about what's actually in our corporate network because there's nothing here. So it might as well be a coffee shop. My last organization was the polar opposite. It was a very traditional, and JJ is familiar with this organization because she did some work for us there. Very large infrastructure, very complicated infrastructure. Implementing Zero Trust in that type of environment is a very different beast. So I have to say, where I am right now, it's very empowering because there are a lot of things I just don't have to worry about because we took those things off the table based on how we designed our environment. That's maybe
jump in. Sorry.
One last thing I was going to say, simplification. That might be my fourth strategic anchor. Anything we can simplify helps. Sorry, JJ.
No, I got excited because, I get a little wound up. And so one of the things that kind of tweaks me is all of the, the marketing stuff. I'm just going to, sorry, I got to choose my words carefully here. All of the marketing stuff, all of the manufacturers are coming out. And eventually, the same thing with NAC. Oh, we do that too. Oh, we do that too. Oh, we do that too. It's like there's Zero Trust toaster ovens now. But the thing is like your organization now is very, cloud centric and distributed like that. But all of the rest of and Zero Trust products that we have right now, if we can air quote Zero Trust products, but products that are designed to meet a lot of those objectives, work really well in a remote workforce setting where the users are not co-located with each other and the users are not co-located with the resources they're accessing. That entire model falls apart when we get onto any type of on-prem campus environment. And this has been the challenge with Zero Trust is all of these products are pitched equally. And there's a very thick dividing line between how you're trying to do that level of granularity with, I'm just going to kind of call it on-prem versus not. And to take that one step further and just to demonstrate how weird and technical and nitty-gritty this can get, even in your environment. Chuck, I'm going to pick on you because you guys moved into an office, everything's somewhere else. I'm assuming you guys are connected to things wirelessly over Wi-Fi. Even if you have network segmentation and you have different VLANs, any SSID that's being broadcast is its own broadcast domain from the same as we would think of a network wired broadcast domain, which immediately means there can be lateral movement and put those things at risk if they're connected to the same SSID. Again, they can be on different VLANs, but over the air, they're in the broadcast domain. And so, all of this conversation around segmentation and ransomware and Zero Trust, those models are great when we don't have layer 2 and 3 adjacency, and then they start to fall apart from a product suite when we move to on-prem. And so that's one of the things that just tweaks me, because at the board level, they're going, we're going to do Zero Trust. We've got this product, and none of that is effective for 80% of environments.
Yeah, and JJ, I agree. The other thing we've tried to do is focus on the device. So yes, okay, you get on our network, you're not going to see anything. I also looked at it from the standpoint when we pivoted to work from home, and we still, we're basically a hybrid company, even though we have an office here, and we're going to continue being a hybrid company. People are taking their laptops. Everybody has a corporate laptop that's hardened that they take home. That device has to be able to work on that home network as well as it would in the office. So that's the mentality we've tried to approach things from. It's just, the reality is, people work off their laptops these days. Those laptops are going to be in hostile environments, whether it's the office or something else. I'm just going to assume the office is just as hostile as a coffee shop or the home. So that's, or my house. Exactly. Yeah.
One of the things we haven't brought up yet, I don't know if I've heard the word yet, is talking about risk assessment, management, mitigation, assessing risk. Maybe we start there. That's been traditionally kind of where we think about, okay, what is our risk profile in different domains, different aspects, and then that drives maybe where our focus is. Is that still a relevant strategy for us? Is that still one of the key kind of arrows in our quiver, or have we evolved past that?
Oh, someone's got to have a viewpoint on this.
Come on.
Sorry, I'm just laughing at the toaster comment, so I kind of missed the first part of that question.
Yeah, Mitch, can you ask that again?
So risk assessment as a way to prioritize where our focus is. Are we still doing that? Is that still an essential part of what we do, or is there, we bypass that doing something different now?
I mean, I think it has to be part of what we do. The question is, back to JJ's earlier comment about most organizations only having a bare minimum number of people. Risk assessment in and of itself is a full-blown practice, and you could have FTEs that do nothing but that. So, Matt's organization can probably afford enough people to do that. My organization maybe is getting to that point, but
no. So let me jump in here.
Yeah.
In Matt's company, they have a separate, if I'm not mistaken, chief risk officer, right? Who's separate and apart from the CISO. And that, again, when I said in the beginning that this thing's too big, that is the big thing. Where risk used to be paramount, right? Managing risk was security. That's when security was part of the risk team. Today, security is more part of IT. It's more part of IT, as I said, its own thing. But risk still maintains its pedigree, right? From that CFO kind of lineup, and managing risk has become, and I don't know if it's a good thing, to tell you the truth. I don't know, but managing risk has become bifurcated from managing security.
Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with that. I mean, and really where I was going with this is to say, even in a company of 1,000 people right now, there's not a formalized risk management function. We're not quite to that point of maturity or, size where we'd have that. So, yeah, I mean, to the extent that we think about risk, and we do, by the way, I mean, we do have risk assessment processes, and we go through and we document things. It's just not, it's a small sliver of what we do. We do use it to help prioritize where we focus efforts. I personally would love to have more investment in that area, but I've got to pick and choose where I'm investing, and I'm not putting more resources to do a more thorough risk assessment at the moment. But I agree. I mean, more, in a bigger company, there's going to be a full-blown risk management function that would be
But keep in mind that risk management function is, depending on what industry they serve, et cetera, it's looking at risk way beyond technology risk, security risk. Those are risk items as part of this bigger program. So, I mean, I actually, as companies get larger, I like looking at risk more broadly, right? And that the topics we're talking about are big components of that. And then there's alignment with the CISO or, whoever runs all of the production operations or whatever, right? That they're making sure that all those risks are being managed and raised up. So if I think about it from a board perspective, right? Like that's how I want to be having conversations with the organization, right? And we talk about cyber and technology risk and all these other things, scale risk, everything as part of this bigger program, but they all have quite a voice, and the responsibility goes back to those organizations that are fundamentally driving those things. So,
and all I was really trying to say is that in one example, this is one data point, right? But a company that grew from 5 people to 1,000 people in 8 years, security really has driven that broader risk assessment process. And so, yes, when I convene our executives and we go through those risk discussions, we're talking about not just the cybersecurity risk. I'm actually encouraging everybody to think about broad business risk, but quite frankly, security started that ball rolling. And
it breaks the business if you have a problem and your customers say we're not going to do business, right? I mean, so that makes perfect sense, right?
Yeah.
For us, we have an ERM, Enterprise Risk Management Program. I am a sliver of enterprise risk management because it's risk management across the board. And it could be everything from socioeconomic things going on in the world to product releases to sales pipeline to, it's all of these kinds of things fit into a larger ERM. So Alan, to your point, it is something outside of, I manage the risk on my world through the ERM. I actually don't present ERM stuff to our board. We have someone who does that, the head of risk. But I have to point out, a lot of people have said, hey, Matt, you work for this large company. Of course, there's a CISO and a program. I got to be honest, I talk to a lot of companies in the world, bigger than mine, sometimes by multiple folds, that are looking to hire their first CISO that don't have an ERM, right? To me, it's cultural as well. When you're thinking about security, it's a culture. Chuck, you're lucky to be in an organization where they obviously thought about it. The fact that you all are so small and have such rapid growth, and they didn't wait until they got to, we'll hire our first CISO when we get to the 1 or 2 or 3,000 person mark, is a real big deal. And I think that's why risk is so important. And not all companies, Chuck, you're not, for example, and JJ talks about it in a lot of the work she does, it's not all companies are going to have an ERM program, let alone a mature ERM program. But again, this goes back to the conversation through Slack channels. Those of us that are lucky enough, privileged enough to be a part of a really good ERM, we want to help. Ask. Nothing is private. It's not like we developed something and patented it and I can't tell you how we do ERM. We'll tell you how we do ERM, right? We can have those kinds of conversations without it being at least with me, I'm going to charge you X number of dollars to be a part of our ERM. That doesn't work that way. So we're talking about risk, and we're really moving on, and there's a lot of things that are popping up in the chat that I absolutely agree with throughout this. A lot of people are bringing up the fear component. They fear failing an assessment more than they are willing to put stuff in. And I have to throw this out. We are going to talk about this in some of the later series in pretty significant depth, but that to me means that failing the assessment, whatever it may be, and let's just use it as a FedRAMP assessment, all would fall on Chuck's shoulders. And I think that is one of the core problems with a lot of the way compliance assessments are done. It's just his fault, or it's just Julie's fault, or my fault, instead of it being a business problem. And we have to elevate those conversations so that for us, part of our board, we have a security and risk committee. If we fail some of the larger assessments, it's the problem for a larger group of people in our organization, which I'm just one of. I may have a lion's share of the getting yelled at, but it's a larger group, so there's a lot more involvement in our ability to pass those things, and a lot more conversations elevated in the organization, instead of I show up to a meeting and go, hey, we passed, and everybody goes, oh, good, and we move on, or hey, I failed, and they go, oh, that's great, you're fired, and they move on without me. It's very, very important as you're going through this. And again, it ties even to some of what JJ was talking about earlier with some of the zero trust mindsets tied into compliance. So Mitch, I didn't know if there were any specific questions we missed. We only have a few minutes left in our conversation, and I wanted to make sure we got through them before I bring up one last topic, and we only have a few minutes left, but I think it's an important topic as we're closing this out. So we talk about risks, we talk about threat landscapes, but detection, I think, is an important thing. Chuck, you're in an interesting environment where you don't have a lot of legacy. You're all cloud-based. Julie has a different environment. JJ's talking about, going from being at home, which I always told people, we move people from generally secure environments to the most hostile networks on the planet. That's people's houses. I mean, the stuff that started attacking our equipment, when we put them in their homes, we would make phone calls and be like, your television is attacking us right now. And they're like, it's what? I'm like, yeah, you've got a problem. Please unplug your television, because if I see an attack vector from a Vizio, I'm going to go mental. So how do you all think? And we don't want to talk about tech. And JJ, I agree with you. We're not here to say, hey, buy this VMS versus that VMS. You're killing me with the zero trust toaster. I will say I Googled it a minute ago just to see if someone branded one. I'm going to brand a zero trust toaster. I'm getting zero trust. I'm sticking it on my toaster at home, and I'm going to send everybody a photo. It's going to be great. But when it comes to detecting problems, I'd love just to get some general thoughts in the last few minutes from each of our panelists on how you go about that concept, not actuality. I'm not looking for we have this, but detecting a problem is very difficult. So how do you all approach that?
I mean, it certainly starts with visibility. If you don't have visibility into all the corners of your assets, whether it's on-prem or in the cloud or whatever. And again, as we said earlier, nobody does, right? We all know we have some gaps, but it certainly starts with that. And then, certainly, as we also were talking about earlier, having some idea of what baseline is. You have to start there.
It's almost like you read my mind to bring this full circle. I was hoping someone would say visibility. I agree. I completely agree. Julie, JJ, do you disagree?
Absolutely not. I mean, I think that's where it absolutely all starts. And to the point, it's starting to figure out how to identify when something is off, as opposed to, hey, now I have all this visibility, but what are the signals I'm looking for to tell me, hey, there's something there?
Yeah, I guess I disagree a little bit in that I do believe it's the starting point. It's the cost of entry into even to play. But I think a lot of, again, kind of small, mid-sized organizations really don't understand the complexity of event correlation. Let me just be direct with that. And they think, okay, and believe me, this conversation has happened scores of times where it's okay, we're of the size, we're in a regulated industry, we're going to hire our first real security person, like an analyst, and that person's, the way they're basically writing the internal job description is they're going to look at firewall logs. And I'm not joking. And so this is when I say, there's a huge gap in the expertise and the maturity level between an organization of, of certain sizes, and those that are just starting out. It's a little bit troubling, and they don't necessarily have the resources and understand what that looks like. And so, sitting them down and saying, look, having somebody look at firewall logs is not, well, it's really not going to solve anything, frankly. I mean, the best you could do is, maybe trigger an email alert if there's an unexpected change to a firewall. But when you scrub through any single system log, it's just a bunch of stuff. And no human can sift through that. I don't care how well you know the platform. So, that next step of what do we do with all of that data once we have the visibility, I think that's key. And I think that's where, a lot of value comes in, the managed solutions. If there's a lot of, I'm not naming names, but there are a lot of solutions or services out there that are not really valuable. But there are a handful that are exceptionally valuable that basically, give you an entire SOC team and 24/7 response and human, visibility and eyes on these things. That is an extension of an organization. And that's, an appropriate next step for a lot of these companies. But there is just so much confusion around what it means to have a security person and looking at logs and visibility. And I think we can't stop there.
100%. Totally. Alan, you've been quiet on this, and I know it's a passion of yours. I'll give you the last comment.
You want me to take the last comment? I'm honored, but you know what? I feel like there's people who are a lot more qualified than me here. I mean, Julie, Chuck, anything?
Well, no, I mean, I agree with JJ. It's not, but in order to get to the, hey, how do you look for the anomalies? How do you look for these things? You got to have it, right, to be able to start to assess. So I couldn't agree more. And getting help is critical, right? Especially for smaller organizations, right? You're not going to be able to do this all yourself, right? So leverage the community and the offerings and services that are out there to at least get going.
So we are almost at the top of the hour. I hate to cut it off. We're going to need to hand it over to Cody before I do. On behalf of Matt and myself, thanks to all of our panelists, and of course, thanks to you, the audience. It's been fantastic. A lot of fun conversation. Cody, take it away.
Thank you, Mitch. And I'd also like to thank Chuck, Matt, JJ, Julie, Alan, and Mitch for taking the time to be here with us today and give us all of their perspectives on this topic. I'd also like to remind our audience that today's session was recorded. So following this panel, you'll receive an email with a link to access the recording on demand. You can also find it living on the Security Boulevard website at securityboulevard.com/webinars. So quickly, we do have 4 $25 Amazon gift cards to give away. Our first winner is Ruth B. Our second winner is Jessica T. Our third winner is Lakmir S. And our fourth winner is Eric W. So congratulations. Keep an eye on your inbox to claim that gift card. And if you don't see an email, just check your spam folder. My final thanks, of course, always goes to you, our audience. We really appreciate you being here with us today. Please take a moment to fill out our post-webinar survey, and we hope to see you at a future TechStrong Learning webinar. Thank you all for being here today.